Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're just about to start the last session for the conclave. It's been a great weekend full of conversations, workshops, roundtables, and we're extremely grateful to everyone who's made the journey to Lahore to attend the conference. Just before I hand it over to Zarar Khoro, the reason why we wanted this to be the last session was also because it ties in very well with what we are trying to do and the kind of moment we are living in right now in 2025. Just between the start of the planning of the conclave and to the actual conclave, and we've had like about 3 to 4 wars that have started and then kind of like taken place just in Pakistan's immediate neighborhood, not to mention the countless countries that Israel has attacked in the last 12 months or so. Alex likes to point this out very frequently to me, that it's unbelievable that Iran attacked Pakistan and Pakistan attacked Iran just 12 months ago, and it feels like we're living in a fundamentally different world today. So, because obviously we've moved on from that fairly quickly. I'll just hand the conversation over to Zarar Khoro, and a question that I have been faced with very frequently over the last 2 days has been that why is Zarar Khoro doing the UN session? And I will just like to say this as an answer to that question that I've been asked, that I think there are very few, and that is me being very generous with the number, very few journalists and commentators in Pakistan who have an eye on the region and the world and how that is affecting us living in Pakistan, and Zarar Khoro is the imminent voice for it. So thank you so much, Zarar, for making the journey to Lahore for this weekend. And over to you. Thank you.
I will go anywhere for a free ticket and food. Thank you. And I mean, Lenin once said that there are years in which nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which decades happen. So, I mean, when Raza right now mentioned that Iran attacked Pakistan, I had forgotten about it because so much had happened. We had all forgotten about it. We memory hold it. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for your stamina, patience, and perseverance in being here on what is the last session of the last day of what I thought was a fantastic conclave. In the past 3 days, we've seen debates and conversations that have been more passionate, more vibrant, and more constructive than anything we've seen in the last 80 years from the United Nations. Am I right? Is that a little bit unfair? Probably. The United Nations has done some good things, but I'm being about as unfair as the United Nations Security Council usually is. And I don't think that there's anything wrong in saying that. For the last 2 years, we have seen a genocide unfold. We've seen crimes that I have no words for. I think we'll have to invent an entirely new vocabulary. How do you define seeing an image of a baby decapitated in his mother's womb? I mean, a place of such safety, such a sacred place of such safety and security, and all of that is gone. And every time in front of the UNSC, even the most timid, the most tame resolution that is brought to criticize Israel, to just bring an end to the carnage, and the United States ambassador raises a very finely manicured but blood-stained hand and ensures that the carnage continues, ensures that our feeds, our phones are filled with images of murdered men, women, and children, and there is just no end to it. And the only thing that it seems that we can draw any comfort from is by me saying that there are probably 3 more people here than there were at Netanyahu's UNGA speech. I mean, that's all we're left with, right? We're left with protests, we're left with walkouts, we're left with, oh my God, let me tweet this. And while that's important, it's also sickeningly impotent. As impotent as the United Nations seems to be in this day and age. But how did we get here? I mean, it perhaps wasn't always thus. Perhaps there was a time when we had some hope. And I'm not talking about being a student and being in the Model United Nations and putting that on your CV. No. There was a time, I think, perhaps that we had genuine hope. And that hope, I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, is long gone. So when we're sitting here and we talk about the United Nations in its particular form, can it survive? Can it evolve? And if not, what replaces it? And when we talk about global governance, what do we even mean by that? So we're going to just get right into this conversation. I'm going to introduce our panelists, from in order of appearance. We have Alex Shams, who I think this is like the 50th session you're in, right? This is at least. So, thank you for that. Iranian American writer, journalist, anthropologist, so on and so forth. We have Kaya Genç. I pronounced that correctly, right? Allah ka shukar hai. And Kaya Genç hails from Turkey, and his work is really interesting because I was reading up on it really quickly, and it's sort of at the intersection of investigative and literary journalism, and that's really interesting. And of course, we have Ayma Khosa there in the end, journalist and a researcher on the history of Pak-China relations. So we'll have a talk, and then because this isn't the UNSC. We can also take questions, and I will, of course, exercise veto power because, life is unfair, and so am I. Now, Alex, I want to start with you. We were having a little chat yesterday, right? And, to understand anything, you cannot understand the present, let alone predict the future, attempt to predict the future. So, how many of you can tell me what the predecessor organization of the United Nations was? Anyone? League of Nations, that's right. And what happened to the League of Nations? It died. It started out after World War I, and they're like, oh my God, never again. That's been so overused, right? It's just a dead hashtag. But again, then, just like a few decades later, you had World War II, and there goes the League of Nations. And right now, while we don't have a World War III scenario in front of us, the United Nations is suffering from the death of 1,000 cuts, right? And you had an interesting point, Alex, that the genesis, the birth of the United Nations, in a way, carried the seeds of its own sort of destruction, right? So if you could expand on that.
Definitely, and thank you for that introduction. I think it's important to understand that right now we're looking for accountability from the United Nations. We're trying to find a way to hold countries accountable for the actions they're engaged in. But we often forget that the United Nations, despite the discourse around it, wasn't necessarily set up to hold all, let's say, rule breakers accountable, or all of the people committing war crimes accountable. From the beginning, it was a club of the victors of a war. And although in retrospect, we often think of World War II as a just war, and in the United States, that's very much how it's portrayed, because of it was a war against the Nazis or against Japanese imperialism. At the same time, there was never a reflection or an accountability for what the US did and how it won that war. Because the birth of the United Nations is inseparable from the dropping of atomic bombs on Japan, the firebombing of German cities, mass civilian casualties, in a way that right now it's actually quite interesting. These parallels are often made, right? That the destruction of Gaza...
By Israel. That you firebomb Dresden, why can't we do the same?
I haven't heard that, but that would actually be very accurate, exactly. That Israel would say it, because where I see it often is it's brought up in the sense of the destruction of Gaza is like an atomic bomb has dropped on it. And I think it's exactly an apt comparison, because we saw the US do it. We didn't see it, but in that sense that in the history books, it's clear that it happened. In the US version of the narrative of World War II, it was necessary, but it wasn't necessary. It was necessary for total surrender, for a total defeat of the other powers. But the fact that hundreds of thousands of civilians lost their lives, and that the UN was established in order to then create accountability against the other side, but not to reflect on, okay, at what moment did the United States begin to kill civilians when it didn't need to? How do we find justice for people in Japan or Germany as well who weren't, who were civilians in every sense of the word, and who were targeted by these bombs? And the fact that that was never a question, there was never an opening, and the story we've been fed is that that's not even something to really question. We can think about the atomic bombing as a human tragedy, but not as a political tragedy. We're not taught to question US crimes in World War II or since World War II. And I think as a result of that, it's like we're searching for the UN to hold the US accountable, to hold Israel accountable, and we don't recognize that that was never what it was set up for.
So essentially, I mean, we're, in your words, and I think you've described this quite accurately, we're looking for the UN to fulfill a function that it was never designed to fulfill. In fact, we're looking for the UN to fulfill a function that is the exact opposite of what it was designed to be. And I'm talking about the UNSC. When it's a victor's club, right? It's a winner's club, and to the victor, the spoils.
And that's not to say that, and I think it's also important, we can talk about the founding of the UN, while also recognize that over the decades, the recently, like the decolonized world attempted to take over the UN and turn it into something that could be used, that could actually hold those powers accountable. And from the beginning, I mean, since the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s in particular, amid decolonization, there was this moment when the possibility of actually holding the UN to its promises was possible. But at every instance, we saw that those attempts were thwarted.
By the powers that be.
Exactly. And in that sense, history is useful because in order to understand what's happening right now and how a genocide is unfolding with the support of one of the members of the Security Council, all we have to do is kind of look back at previous decades and we can see different instances of that unfolding.
True. Kaya, if we look back at those decades, I mean, I think we're more or less of the same generation here, not you, you're younger, and you, Ima. But you know, there was a time in which we would look to the United Nations, right? I mean, in Pakistan, you know, oh, there's this resolution on Kashmir, and oh my God, India's in violation of it. And we used to talk that up like it's a big deal. Nobody talks about that anymore, right? Because there's no point. Can you give me a moment, you know, from your life, from your experience, in which the UN did or looked like it was going to fulfill the kind of function that we, you know, in the what we love to call the global south, wanted it to?
Yes, definitely. In the 1990s,
Oops.
in the 1990s, I was growing up in Istanbul as a young Marxist, reading all the Marxist classics and believing in the vision of an international revolutionary working class, and organizing with my friends in high school. And then increasingly, the war in Bosnia, the massacres in Bosnia, with all that happening, I remember being very passionate in my Marxist beliefs, but also feeling like a bit of a dinosaur, reading The Guardian, discovering those publications, and New Labour, Tony Blair, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe these guys are more progressive. They're maybe progressive guys, these so-called liberals. And maybe I'm a dinosaur, and, you know, Milosevic was also considers himself a socialist, so I should leave this ship and just join the international coalition of the United Nations, all these people who really resolve these issues in New York. And I think the liberals really betrayed people like me who saw some slimmer of hope in them. And so, of course, the first big, I think, betrayal came when I was 22, 2003, with the invasion of Iraq. But before the invasion of Iraq and between the invasion of Iraq and the massacres in Bosnia, I think there was a moment when Marxists like me or people coming from other traditions felt that this is a system that can work. And I remember United Nations was 50-year-old when I was growing up, when I was in high school. And it had such a, it had a history that I didn't know about. I didn't know about Franklin Roosevelt. I didn't know about the New Deal. I didn't know about Churchill. But those guys were represented as like real heroes at the time. But as a Leninist myself, I had to see Stalin's name in the foundation of United Nations and be suspicious, but I wasn't. And I think it was such a good sell the United Nations was in the 1990s. And the sell, I think that sell convinced people in countries like mine, in Turkey, that, you know, just don't be a dinosaur, just believe in us, leave your ideological beliefs behind, just join the process. And this is what led to this moment.
So when you look back at that 22-year-old Kaya, I mean, what do you have to say to him now? I mean, do you feel that that was like a failing to understand on your part, or was it just like, I mean, a straight-up betrayal, like you said, a sell?
Yeah, I would just say, look at Tony Blair more carefully. And look what he's doing now in Gaza, like his new role. And he's still alive. And this is the politics of Blair, like power play, survivalism, like even if you leave your political position, just get the money, get those positions. And that's the world of international politics, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's also the intersection of imperialism and capitalism, right? Which is, imperialism is capitalism's final form in a very real sense, right? What next? If we are looking at a post-UN, we are already looking in a world where the UN is increasingly irrelevant. I can't count how many wars there have been in the last year, month. I don't know. There was Iran and Israel. There was Pakistan and India, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and probably others. Sudan is going on. That's invisible. As there was a wonderful session on that earlier. None of these, the ones that have been brought to a close, the UN just came in later, maybe gave a couple speeches, swept up, some of the broken glass. But they weren't stopped because of the UN. They were stopped, because of, you could say, the intervention of greater powers. So are we looking at a world in which the UN is there, it's a talk shop, people come in, blah, 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 but the actual work is done in back rooms and between regional power alliances? What's your take on this?
So I'm actually very passionate about this topic, and
You have your notes. Yes.
Okay, but I'll try to keep it short, and if I'm going
No, go for it, man. We have plenty of time.
Okay, cool. So to the question, what's next? My argument is that the world, as Gramsci says, the old world is dying and the new is waiting to be born, and now is the time for monsters. I would say the new world is being born before our eyes. And the challenge for us is to understand the changes that are taking place. So, and I also want to make a proposition, which might be a little uncomfortable, but, it's not just my idea. There are many scholars and, thinkers all over the world who are talking about this. My argument is that the emerging counter-hegemonic order, which is led by the global south, is not a threat to global governance, but is rather global governance finally becoming truly, truly global in its truest sense. And in that, I would, take forward what Alex said, and is that the United Nations, when it was conceived, was it was a victor's idea. And it was reflecting at that time, rulers of a world which was colonial at that time. It did not necessarily represent the majority of the population. And at this time, in 2025, the UN does not represent the moral realities of our time. It does not reflect the economic realities of our time. It does not reflect the demographic realities of our time. The world has changed immensely since 1945 to now. And the UN did not die, with just one event.
Yeah. It was 1,000 cuts.
1,000 cuts, exactly. So every time unilateral action was taken, every time that it was shown to the world, especially the global south, that you don't have a seat at the table, and there are, in fact, greater powers who have a seat at the table, and they will decide for you unilaterally what's going to happen. That was the time when UN was dying a death by 1,000 cuts. So now there is this new world, and what does it look like? Well, it is going to be a world that is a multipolar in nature. And that's actually wonderful news for all of us, because it opens doors for countries like us. And the genesis of this new multipolar world is, in fact, also goes back to the time when UN was ascendant. I don't know how many people know about this, but there was this conference that took place in 1955, which is called the Afro-Asian People's Solidarity Conference, otherwise known as the Bangdan Conference of 1945. And the Bangdan Conference, and then it was the precursor to the non-aligned movement. And the Bangdan movement was actually a fantastic movement. So I read the archives of those conversations, and there was a big fight over, you guys, the final resolution is reflecting Soviet principles, and then the other side was saying, no, we have
the usual factionalism,
a lot of factionalism going on. And so the Chinese actually proposed they said, you know what, why don't we write this resolution reflecting the UN Charter So it was right to self-determination, sovereignty, immense emphasis on sovereignty, because you have to understand these countries were coming out of colonial rule. So all these countries were immensely, guarded about making sure that nobody's trying to come and,
And vulnerable and justifiably paranoid.
And economic sovereignty. So not just political sovereignty, economic sovereignty, legal sovereignty. So sovereignty in the truest sense of the word. So the genesis of that was laid during the Bangdang moment. And then the Bangdan era followed, in which the non-aligned movement was ascended. And now somehow, over time, the hegemonic culture of the generation that you grew up in which we all believed UN was, UN could save the world, and all we have to do is just, believe in these universal values that they're telling us are universal, but it somehow doesn't include our values, but okay. So I lost my track.
You were talking about Bangdan?
Yes. So the Bangdan, I'm just saying,
that an alternative was sort of emerging, is that what you're saying?
And has been erased from popular memory, but it still exists. And it is now shaping, the spirit of Bangdan is now shaping the world that is emerging before our eyes. If I may, I've written down like a few points of what I think the pillars of this new emerging world should look like, could look like. The first one is, of course, the idea that sovereignty and solidarity are complementary concepts. They are not, contradictory to one another. And the most essential aspect is that it is not one hegemon replacing another, but rather regional autonomy, negotiated interdependence, and the principle that no single power can dictate terms to the rest. So the world now has options. You can go to the Asian bloc, you can go to the Eurasian bloc. There's different multilateral organizations, institutions that are opening up spaces for countries like Pakistan and also other countries to take their issues too. Second, international law should be reevaluated from the ground up. So the current system gives precedence to corporate rights over human rights, to investor protections over environmental sustainability, to patent monopolies over access to medicine. So we need, mandatory debt audits distinguishing legitimate from odious obligations. We need global taxation on resource extraction, which, by the way, is completely missing from conversation. And then democratic control of the international monetary system, the pulse, and the ending dollars exorbitant privilege, something, again, that nobody wants to talk about. So third, the right to development must be justiciable, not aspirational. That means that UN mechanisms should have the ability to sanction states that impose unilateral coercive measures, that manipulate commodity prices, that engage in technology hoarding. And the proposed Court of Crimes Against Humanity should include economic crimes, structural adjustment programs that kill millions of people through austerity, sanctions regimes that target civilian populations, and debt servicing that, diverts resources from health and education. Further, South-South trade. So the Belt and Road Initiative.
I think that if you were a head of state, like, there would be regime change like in about the next 5 minutes.
I have a lot of ideas on that.
I'm sure you do. We'll come back to them. Now, again, you're looking at a world in which, okay, so either the UN no longer exists in a sense, or is again largely irrelevant. It's just sitting there. Is reform possible though? I mean, Alex, I want to take your view on this, and I want to tell you guys something funny. Is, recently I think Malaysia, one of the Malaysian ministers said that, hey, there shouldn't be a veto. Okay? Someone said it, I could be wrong, I think it was Malaysia. And then I looked up that, is that even possible? So yeah, it is possible, but what you need is 2/3 of the General Assembly, and all 5 veto powers have to agree to give up their veto. So I have to sort of vote against myself and curtail my powers. And I can assure you, had I any powers, I would never give them away. So again, is reform possible? And again, and with that, I just want to go, okay, you're Iranian by heritage, and regardless of what one may or may not think of the current government or the dispensation in Iran, we see that Iran is sanctioned like that, man. Like this. You're breathing wrong, you're sanctioned. We've seen atrocious war crimes and not even a word. Doesn't that boil your blood? It does, right?
Yes.
Boils my blood. I'm not even Iranian.
So I think you very easily laid a very good case for why the UN might not be reformable. And I agree with many of the ideas you're proposing that need to be changed. But at the same time, I think where I disagree very strongly is I'm not sure if I can find any way to place my hope in states in general. A multipolar world to me doesn't seem like that great of a replacement because 3 months ago, Israel attacked Iran, killed more than 1,000 people, left tens of thousands of people homeless, millions were forced to leave. And Iran, which should be at the center of that multipolar world, right? This is a country that is so sanctioned that if you do business with Iran, you cannot do business with the US or Europe. A country that has strong relations with China and Russia, on paper, should be the heart of the axis of some anti-American alliance. And not a finger was lifted to help Iran. In this moment when Israel is attacking it with missiles. And even I look at the Iranian government because after the war, there was a certain move towards nationalism because many people in Iran felt that their government, however oppressive it might be towards them,
Still our government.
it's still our government and it's preferable to an outside power attacking us. But then what did we see? Almost immediately, the Iranian government began cracking down on dissidents, began cracking down on mutual aid networks. It forced out more than 1 million Afghans from the country, scapegoating them in order to build a nationalist idea of Iran triumphed. And more than 1 million refugees who live in Iran, who survived the war, were dumped at the border overnight and forced into Afghanistan. And to me, this is a perfect encapsulation of why the hope is not in states. And I look back even at the Bandung conference and I see a bunch of military dictators who in the name of colonized people, who they themselves were immediately repressing to keep their own power, went onto the world stage and said, we're the world's hope. We're the ones who are going to save us. But I don't think those military dictators are going to save us. I don't think anyone representing state institutions in that way is going to save us. For me, the hope is at the local level. The hope is local governance. The question isn't, I think, as I mentioned, you perfectly explained why the UN will not be reformed and cannot be reformed. But for me, that's a reason to look elsewhere, to try different models that are not focused on nation states, that we've seen time and time again cannot give what we need. During the war on Iran, it wasn't the Iranian government that protected people. It was Iranians and Afghans who came together and supported each other at the local level. And for me, that's where the hope is. That's where the hope of accountability is. When I look at Gaza, I don't think the UN is going to hold Israel accountable, but I see the world holding Israel accountable. I see the world in the streets for Gaza. And for me, that's where the hope is, because one slogan I've heard often in the Arab world is, we thought we were going to free Palestine, but actually Palestine freed us, right? Because we see Palestine around us everywhere, and it's important to see Palestine and also see the Palestines in our context and fight for those as well. Not to replace Palestine, but to recognize that our freedom is all connected.
Gaza isn't just a genocide, it's a blueprint. It's
Exactly.
a blueprint. It's a blueprint for what awaits us. Absolutely. I want to get your view on that, Aima. I'm gonna come back because you've been pushing back on Bandung here. But before that, Kaya, I want to get a view from Turkey on this also. I mean, again, regardless of internal politics, whether you like Erdogan, don't like Erdogan, Turkey as a nation has emerged as, I think, as a geopolitical pole. I mean, certainly a regional, ingress into Central Asia, into the Mediterranean. I mean, it's very much an emerging power with a solid military-industrial complex, which we've seen across the board, used in many, many theaters, Sudan, Ukraine, so on and so forth. What's the view there? I mean, and what's your personal view, and what's the feeling on the street? I mean, the UN doesn't enter into any conversation there, does it?
In Turkey, I mean, international relations is seen as integral part of political parties and the identity of the parties. And the ruling party, AKP, had a prime minister called Ahmet Davutoğlu, who was an international relations professor, and he wanted to realign Turkey with its immediate neighbors. And for people like me who didn't like Turkey's slavish imitation of the West and rejection of its cultural legacy, this was like sweet to hear. Yes, let's go to Beirut, let's go to Aleppo, let's make cultural alliances. Like Alex, I'm also working in the culture and arts industry. The slavish imitation of the West really destroyed Turkey's soul. So this was something that I really supported. But what happened was Turkey went to Cairo and asked Egyptians to imitate the Turkish model. And then in Aleppo, Turkey wanted a military solution. And so all these cultural attempts to realign the country and to fix its role as a NATO warrior, like on the eastern front of this alliance. We are the last border of NATO. So this all started to change. But Davutoğlu wasn't a popular prime minister, because at the end of the day, when people went to the votes, they said, we want more protections for the country. We're not that interested in international politics, and maybe we shouldn't really interfere in Syria. Maybe this whole new role of Turkey, global role, is maybe hurting the economy. So the President Erdogan had to get rid of Davutoğlu and realign his policies. And maybe we shouldn't think that much about geography, history, and we should just be a regional power and not go to Cairo and ask people to imitate our model. They can decide it for themselves. So I think Turkish foreign policy had these big goals of really challenging the global world order. But when it comes to the ballot box, I think they found that it's not a priority on people's list for voting. And now there's a big economic crisis in Turkey. And if you talk about challenging UN and the system and realigning the Middle East, people are like, yeah, do that, but that's
not
secondary.
a real.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm hungry, and I can't find a job, and so these things are kind of abstract right now, even in a country like Turkey.
Fair enough. I mean, that's kind of leaning into what you were saying too, because that's also in a way the street speaking, right? That's the street speaking, and different streets speak different things, and that's the whole thing. I mean, are we being a little bit too optimistic in banding the entire global South together, Aima? Because I mean, hey, there's Pakistan and India also global South. We hate each other, I mean, then there's that look at the UAE and look at Turkey. There's a serious confrontation there. One of the battlefields is in Sudan. So I mean, I get the emotion, right? I mean, I want to see the old order burn as much as you do, and see something wonderful rising phoenix like from the ashes. But isn't all of human history really just trading one hegemon for another?
See, historically, we have not known a moment like the unipolar moment that we grew up in ever before, where one power was so powerful, and it had entrenched itself, its value systems, its mass media, everything it was so deeply entrenched all over the world. So obviously, when that system is going to be in transformation, it's going to be very ugly. In any case, politics, whether it's domestic politics or it's politics in the world system, it's not a neat, handover of like the baton that it's going to happen. But introducing a little bit of competition in the world system, creating a little bit of tension, it opens up space and options for countries like ours. And sorry, Alex, I'm going to disagree with you on this, the point that, we shouldn't have, or we don't have hopes from our states. I can understand where you're coming from, but in the case of Gaza, we have seen what happens to a people when they don't have a strong state. And as a people who just came out of a 4-day war with India, and and they're also a global South country, and rather they see themselves as leaders of the global South. The Nehruvian vision was, we are leaders of the global South.
Vishwa Guru, bhai.
Yeah. But if we did not, and we have a lot of domestic problems. We have huge political instability. Our economy is in shambles all the time. There's a crackdown on dissent. But when we were in that crisis, we were saying, thank God, strong army, wow, you know. And we were grateful for, you know, having a state in which, you know, we were suddenly one cohesive unit. So, and it's even for Iran. So, I know exactly what you're saying.
Exactly.
But this is how war deceives us. This is how the generals win, because they convince us that our safety is only guaranteed by guns, when guns don't guarantee safety. How many years have India and Pakistan been at war? And it keeps happening. And look at Sudan. 2 military generals have created the world's worst humanitarian crisis completely unnecessarily out of greed. Right? I don't think guns bring peace. And to me, that's what the story is about. Gaza is being killed not just because they don't have a state. There are people who live in states who are suffering. But when we think that military generals bring peace, they bring stability, we forget about the daily suffering that's all around us in the systems that they rule, and instead we focus on these moments of exceptional violence. And because I understand the impulse, and I'm affected by it too, right? As the first few days watching Israel crush Iran, watching my family flee their homes, watching people really suffering in a way that in Iran they have no experience of this kind of urban destruction and warfare. I said, they have to respond, they have to do something. And I think it's a totally natural impulse, but I think precisely that impulse is what deceives us into not recognizing the violence of the order that we live in every day and the inequality that it's based on. And the moment our main hope is in military leaders, in guns, in dictators, we've stopped thinking about how to get out of this mess, and we're just trying to struggle within it. And Sudan is the perfect example of why that's a terrible long-term idea, and why it actually hurts the people who it claims to, or it supposedly could be protecting.
I mean, it's a debate, man. It's a debate. Do you wanna answer that before, like, you know, I open up the floor?
No, you can open up the floor.
I'll open up the floor.
Yeah,
I'll open up the floor. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I do hear what you're saying, because I mean, we've agreed on this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be a little bit of a balance, but it just seems that increasingly, I mean, again, I'm going to come back to that. It is a time of monsters, and you know, as sad as it seems, and I think that we're just heading towards more of that, right? We're just heading towards more militarization. I mean, the justice that you speak of is manufactured in such small quantities.
Well, and I think at one point it was mentioned here that we're not yet in World War III, and honestly, I think we are in World War III. I don't know what...
It's a slow burn.
Well, and it's multiple conflicts unfolding at many times that later we look back and we say that was an era of conflict. Because even right now, not only have there been so many wars, we don't even know how to name the wars that have happened, right? Israel attacked Lebanon. We don't really have a...
What do you call it?
Is it the 2024 war? Is it the 2026
Israel bombing Damascus? What do you call that?
The Iran-Pakistan conflict, we don't even have a language, and so we forgot about it.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to look back on this time and describe this as some kind of regional war, or a world war, because at the end of the day, the powers that are invested, that are profiting, are global.
Once we have a comfortable perspective on it, right? Because some things are only visible in hindsight, not when...
Like World War I was the Great War,
the Great War.
But while it was happening, it was still unclear what it was.
What do we call it? What do we call it, you know? Anyway, yeah, Sven. Oh, did you raise your hand? You did raise your hand, right? Because you looked surprised after that, after I called on you. So I don't know what to make of that. Do we have a mic? Anyone? Or do we have to shout?
I think it's...
Yeah, inko de do, yeah.
Thank you. I was surprised because I was really happy. I love this topic. And I
You should have been here, man.
I love the tension between Alex, what you're saying, and Aima, what you're saying. And I'm going to be very annoying and try to ask a question that goes into the middle of your perspectives. I agree with the militarization point. I think that's not ideally what I would like to see a state do, even if states revert to that traditionally, because it falls so in line with how states have been created over history, right? I do think there are organizational processes that need to take place at level of states or at level of the UN, right? And my question is this: when I look at the history of the UN, I see time and again one country sabotaging the whole thing, right? United States. Like, I mean, if you look at the declaration of a new international economic order in the 70s, for instance, beautiful. It is like the Bandung Conference. You read it and you're like, I would love that today. Like, that would be great, right? And you see the US kind of like using all of its different types of like hard and soft power to discourage these kinds of initiatives. If you look forward, and I'm very curious here, would there be a case for maybe not a multilateral order in that sense, but kind of a UN without great powers? Just a UN without any country that would not want to subject its own sovereignty to the rules of the group. So let's say a UN without the US, or maybe even a UN without the US, Russia, China, and just a group of, smaller countries.
Is that directed at anyone in particular?
No,
Anybody want to take that?
Yeah.
No one?
Should I take it?
Someone take it, man.
I mean,
Come on.
I wouldn't, in theory, I mean, sure, we want to stick it to the man, but I don't conceive of a world in which we should be excluding things. What the whole tension is the unequalness of the system that exists, where, some countries who are extremely pushed to the peripheries, there are others which are in the center. They don't really understand the demands, the cultures, the imperatives of these smaller countries, and then their decisions are imposed upon them, and the others just can't say anything. So if you are conceiving of a counter-hegemonic bloc which has its own multilateral decision-making role, other powers are welcome, but they all have to be equally subjected to the same rules. We're not saying, we're not claiming states of exceptionalism for ourselves at the cost of others. So, that would be my conception of a new multilateral order.
Okay. Gentleman back there with the, yeah.
My name is Tariq Bingul. I'm mentoring different competitive exams. My question is rethinking global governance.
Also, sorry, if you have a question specific to any one of the panel members, so please do so. Otherwise, you can just give a general question. Ji.
Is rethinking global governance possible without rethinking the role of United States in the United Nations? Don't we think that it is hegemonic and hyper American and Anglo-Saxonism in the global governance without considering the hegemonic position of America itself in the governance? That's the bottleneck in bringing lots of the barriers in the way of the global peace. Don't we think that United Nations has failed in lots of the global conflicts, from Rwanda to the current humanitarian crisis in the United Nations, failed to keep humans' peace in the Gaza, from the Gaza to Afghanistan, and it devastated everything in the global south, from the climate change to the humanitarian crisis. We should first bring America into the lines of the humanitarian laws, and America should respect the global governance and the international relations. Then we can think the global governance of the United Nations should be changed.
I think we've all been saying exactly that from the beginning. कि मतलब सारा मसला ही उनका है ना. In fact, you should look up the Hague Invasion Act. You'll find that funny, because America actually has a law that if any of our troops, politicians or whatever are ever brought before the ICJ, we will invade the Hague. Like actually invade the Hague. Ji, Alex, you wanted to respond.
I wanted to respond as well to the...
It's largely the same question.
Exactly, kind of building on these ideas. I think as part of opposing militarism, we also have to promote peace, diplomacy, multilateral communication, and the kinds of treaties and exactly the proposals that you were mentioning. I mean, the list I agreed with. For me, the question is, how do we implement it? And even the United Nations, I think it's important to criticize it, to recognize what it cannot do, but also recognize what it can do. Because in the last year, since Trump came to power, 80% of the the UNHCR, the UN Agency for Refugee funding has been taken away. And all around the world, all of the programs that have sustained tens of millions of people who are marginalized by the violence of the political order of the world have lost access to basic, to programs that were protecting their basic needs. And so on one hand, We can criticize the UN for what it's not able to do, while also maintaining the values that it purports to hold and supporting it. Because one of the most surprising things for me is that the United States pulled its funding, and so did Europe and all these other countries. Instead of saying we're going to step in, or Japan or India, or any of these other countries that could,
Saudi Arabia.
No one stepped in for these programs that are humanitarian in nature, right? And so I think part of the task is, there's this old adage, is to build a new world in the shell of the old. To critique what's wrong with what's happening around us, but to build different kinds of institutions, to build ways and methods of communication, especially between neighbors. For me, it's less about global governance in that sense of, if Iran and Pakistan could get along, I think that would be good for both sides. If Pakistan and India could get along, that would be good. And the question of how to replace the UN, it's almost like we're still using the tools that of the master, with this idea that we're going to dismantle it and build something in its place. But maybe we don't need something in its place. We need to rethink how we're approaching international relations.
And at that point, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are talking about the UN. We are being very critical, but we should also recognize, like, I mean, look, the UNICEF's done good work. UNRWA was really the only lifeline. Otherwise, Israel wouldn't have destroyed it. Right, there's UNICEF, there's the UNDP, so there is a lot. UNESCO, they wouldn't remove the funding if they didn't think it was running contrary to their agendas. Anyone else? Right there in the green, Mike. Yeah, idhar. Acha, beech mein bhi shayad koi the, but sorry, I'm going to make him run. You know, cardio is important. Ji, idhar.
Yes, hello, my name is Sana and I'm a student of International Relations. I have two questions. They're all journal questions. So, firstly, I think personally that UN is a successful model considering comparatively to the past, sovereignty of other nations are respected. And the other organs of UN, like for example UNW, UNDP are successful. It is the UNSC that has to be remodeled. And at the same time, I also think that UN is favoring Global North because it is essentially funded by Global North, right? Now, coming to my second question, it's like, how do we reshape global governance and UN with the rise of AI and technology? So these are the two questions I think that should be answered.
I think the first one has largely been answered. Unless somebody wants to, Kaya?
Yeah, I think the AI question is interesting.
Yeah.
Because we have people like Peter Thiel in Silicon
the Antichrist.
Valley. Sorry?
The Antichrist himself.
Yes, and those Silicon Valley barons who are really against nation states and who are really against the whole concept of sovereign states. But what they offer instead is even worse.
Yeah.
And I think
techno-feudalism.
Yeah, and so I'm remembering the response to the invasion, the illegal invasion of Iraq, the anti-war coalition, and I think we have to remember the power of the street, and the nation state, I think, is a rotten structure, but people are very much alive on the street, and they're rejecting technology, they're rejecting smartphones, like young people, they're rejecting social media, they're going back to books, to old school ways of campaigning, coming to festivals like this, and really listening to people. And I think these are better ways to change the world. I think United Nations, nation states, those seem increasingly like games people play for money. But being here, talking about what you're passionate about, or writing a brochure and spreading it, not with the intermediacy of social media companies, I think these will increasingly become more important.
Okay, so I'm going to recommend you something. There's this wonderful book by Yanis Varoufakis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right. It's very difficult. Called Techno-Feudalism. Okay? Do check that out. And just like on a little quick note about tech moguls, I think you and I have maybe discussed this. I used to think that, Elon Musk was like the greatest evil, Now I think he's just an idiot, you know, with like sort of these daddy issues and, you know, kind of like a moron and high on ketamine. But people like Peter Thiel and, you know, Zuckerberg, I mean, those guys actually scare me. Those guys actually scare me. But anyway, there was another, yeah, right there. Guy Mike,
Though, if I could just add, idiots are also scary.
No, they're scary.
President Trump is an idiot and he's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, and an idiot with a giant bulldozer can still knock your house down. You know? Now is the time of, kya baat hai? ये मेरा column title आपने दे दिया next. Morons. That's good.
Hi,
I like it.
am I audible?
You are very much so.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the talk. My name is Zaina Khan and I'm a student myself. I am 22. First of all, I'd like to address, I don't know if we should address the elephant in the room, but the argument between Alex and Aima before. Somewhat, I agree with both of you. But why I incline more towards Alex's arguments is like, why are we stressing more and more on military interventions? And, you know, when is there a stop to this, right? While we talk about, you know, military sovereignty and stability that it does provide to our country, why don't we talk about, you know, the power of people that we have on a larger impact? And why I stand with Alex's point is that shouldn't we be coming with a system, with a governance that is more representative and accountable rather than symbolic, right? So it's a general question.
I'll take this one.
Yeah,
I'll take
it's a general question.
Because see, the thing is, okay, so I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding here. I don't think that Aima is promoting militarization. I think that particular comment was that, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like it or not, in a world in which is filled with aggressors, and in a post-Gaza world, I mean, all bets are off. All bets are off. So you need that military deterrence. I think what Alex is cautionary about, and rightfully so, is that by praising that deterrence, I mean, how much power do we give to the military complex, right? So yes, absolutely. I think it is also a difference in looking at the world the way it should be and the way it is. You know, because I mean, we also have to be cognizant of the realities here. So yes, we need all of that. That is what we need to push towards. But perhaps that is going to be a painstaking process.
Okay, yeah, as a generation that is currently facing the consequences of all this global decisions that's been made, how do you think our state is kind of representing our roles, like the youth roles? Why don't we see the amount of protests that we've been seeing in Spain and Italy, for say, you know, recently? Why not in Pakistan?
Well, I mean, I think that you should ask yourself that question. You're in the youth, right? I mean,
right.
look,
but where does the state role?
The state is not going to come into that. The state is none of those protests are state-sponsored. Quite the contrary. Right. I mean, Italy is out there right now. And look, we have to look also at, I mean, if we're talking specifically in the context of Gaza, then we have to look at the historic responsibility of the Western powers. We're not the ones providing cover to Israel. We're not the ones providing economic, political, diplomatic, and military lifelines to Israel. And while we would all love a peaceful world, let's not forget that only the dead have seen the end of war. Right? If there is one constant in humanity, it is war. And I mean, yes, you are suffering from the consequences of the decisions made by the generation before you. I assure you, the generation that comes after you will suffer from the decisions of from the consequences of your generation's decisions, because that is a chain unbroken going back like 8,000-9,000 years.
And if I could just address the protest question, yeah. I mean, I think, and this is something that I think is worth addressing because it's something that Israel often brings up in its propaganda, which is is it says, to students in America who are protesting against the genocide in Gaza, it says, why don't you protest against what's happening everywhere else? Why don't you protest against...
Why not this?
And I think this was an important answer, is it's important for us to protest against the things in particular in which we have a stake and which we have influence. And part of the reasons why, in particular, the protests in the Western countries are so important is because the narrative, the pro-Israel narrative is so dominant, and there are material interests supporting Israel through those countries. And it's not to say that solidarity with Palestine should be restricted to those countries. It should be everywhere. But it goes back to this question of also trying to understand what's the Palestine where I am? What is the problem that I have a role in and that I need to help stop? What is being done in my name? And for me, this goes back to the militarization question, because I think there might be a way of looking at what I said as a kind of idealism, or a way the world should be. But I don't see it like that, because I see militarization not just as the believing in the men with guns. It's the military-industrial complex. It's material interest, but it's also the culture that it creates. When we look at the world stage and it's men beating each other up, and that's how they're solving problems, that teaches us in our own lives that we should be beating each other up and solving problems. When we see Trump speaking the way he does, using violence as a solution and treating other leaders the way he does, he teaches us that we should disrespect each other. And I say that if in our private lives we can respect each other and we dream of a world in which we're kind to each other, then our vision of international relations should also embody that. And for me, we have to have ideals. We have to work towards those ideals. If we don't have aspirations for a better world, for a kinder world, for a better foreign policy, then we're accepting the violence in the world around us and in our homes, because it's not just foreign people or foreign military dictators who are going to hurt us. There are people around us who are going to hurt us. To use the example of Iran, and I think it works for everywhere else, it's not just Israel that's killing Iranians. The Iranian government also has a problem executing Iranians. And those lives of Iranians executed by the Iranian state are just as valuable for me as the Iranians killed by Israel. And I have to fight for both of them.
And that's probably why the powers that be find that conversation so frightening. Right? Because that's not the kind of ideas you want out there. I mean, that's why they want absolute control of the social media algorithms. So you want like just one narrative. And this kind of solidarity is terrifying. Because once it's created, then hey, guess what? It can be directed at local dictators and regional dictators.
Exactly, and that's why they don't want you to ask, what is the Palestine near me? Right? In certain contexts, fighting for Palestine is a way of fighting power. In other contexts, it's a way of getting you not to ask the question of what around me do we need to fix, right? It can, weirdly, right, it can be used to even as a way of, and we see this in Iran very much so. The Iranian government loves to wave the Palestinian flag. I love to wave the Palestinian flag too, but when someone who's repressing their own people says we want freedom for the Palestinians, I say yes, and for us as well. And I think and for me, it goes back to what is the Palestine around us and how do we fight for that?
Two people in the same row, either.
Hello. In a new world order that would be led by China, that we might see happening, would UN be led by China, or the role would be taken by BRICS or SARC or some new organization?
Aima?
The question is general.
I think it's already happening, by the way. I don't think it needs to be, separating the veto powers and what happens in the United Nations Security Council is separate from, the kind of institutions, new institutions that are being built, like through the BRICS, through the Belt and Road Initiative, through SCO. All of these things are alternative institutions and mechanisms that global South countries are getting as a chance to turn to when they are being coerced by other powers. So I think in a world that is being led by, I think we shouldn't just simply say it's going to be led by China, because of course it's an emerging, it is a global power. There are other global powers as well, second tier, third tier. I think options are better rather than saying, one power is replacing the other and now we need to go to that power and be like, okay, sir, how can we be of service to you? So I hope that makes sense.
And even those structures that you're talking about, I mean, China may be the big partner in them, but it's certainly not the only one.
Absolutely. China is, so there was this, I don't know if you remember, when there was a CPEC summit that took place a few years ago when CPEC was a big thing. And there was all of this propaganda that there is CPEC is a new form of colonization that's happening, and and look at what they're doing in Africa. Like basically they're using the things that they did to us to make us afraid of what other powers could do to us. So there was I think it was the Chinese ambassador who made a speech, and he said, or maybe it was a government representative, I don't remember who it was, but he made a very good point. He said, gone are the days when foreign powers could just come to you and take over your economic systems and your political systems and tell you what to. Today's world is not going to accept that anymore. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And also, I just want to say, I want peace. I want people to live in peace. I don't want there to be war.
Aiba is not a warmonger.
Yeah, not at all.
Okay. Yeah.
I just think, in order for there to not be war, we need to be able to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is a very crucial distinction that we should make, And of course, and then we should have the right to change our political systems, our governments, our parties, question our leaders, organize. But yeah. So I hope.
And those are also the ingredients of a strong state, yeah?
Of course.
And you want a strong state, not a hard state. Like the harder the state is, the more easily it shatters. There was a but that guy first, yeah. I think we'll take one or two more questions, Raza, and then.
Hi everyone. First of all, good evening to all of you. And my question is general from the panel. And the question is very straightforward. And the question is that we know well that UN has played a deep role in shaping the world peace and the world order and in fighting climate change and all of that. And we do know very well that there are 5 countries that have supreme power, which we know it very well, that is veto. And we have seen in the past few decades that either it is China or Russia or America, we have seen these 3 countries, whether it is their internal conflict or a global conflict, we have seen these 3 countries using the veto powers a lot, mostly Russia and then the America. And we have seen that in past in Russia-Ukraine war, we have seen Russia using the veto power in the United States, in the United Nations, and now we are witnessing that the United States is using the veto power against Gaza in Israel. My question is that, what vision of United Nations Security Council and the other organizations of the same United Nations do all of you think will shape under the veto power of these 3 nations? Because United Nations is just like an umbrella providing the power to these 5 countries to fight and to create the peace. So if you cannot fight with guns and missiles and nuclear wars, just simply do what you are doing with Iran. Cancel the trade, do sanctions, and what is the worst? It's just like killing someone without guns, starving them to the death. What vision is that you think of without these powers and with this power in the next 25 years? Thank you very much.
Economic warfare is also warfare. Economic warfare is also warfare. बिल्कुल. आप भूख से मारे या आप बंदूक से मारे, बात तो एक ही बनती है ना. I think that's been touched on. The part about the United Nations Security Council. I mean, it seems to me, if anybody disagrees, you can tell me. I think that if it continues like this now, though the whole structure will become increasingly irrelevant, then people will be looking for solutions outside the UN, and I think that's something that you're already seeing. So वो कहते हैं ना कि it is dying its own death, and it will never reform itself. Again, we've also talked about that. Because why would anyone with a veto in their hand willingly give it up, right? It's not going to happen. जी. अगर माइक इनको दे दें, माइक आपके पास ही है शायद, किसके पास है? पता नहीं किसके. I don't know where the mic is. Who has the mic यार? अच्छा उधर है. Okay, चले. Sorry, I wasn't looking over there. I'm sorry.
Okay, I have the mic. Thank you.
You have the mic.
Zarad, circling back to something you said at the very beginning of this talk about the UN and the Indus Conclave, and I just want to dream with all of you, so it's a general question to just say that, it's been really incredible being in a space where we are together, we, have the liberties to speak, so openly and so safely about these excruciating topics from people who are suffering and experiencing this and feel so deeply about it. But I guess my question is how do we grow something like this? How can the Indus Conclave grow? Not as an alternative to the UN and this. Yeah, I guess Raza, this is also for you.
This is for Raza.
But
Get over here, Raza.
Yeah. Like, what do our powers look like today? What are these alternative constructs, and how can we mobilize together?
You're not going to take this? Okay, fine. I think you're seeing it. And
But I mean, like, what's the after process of this incredible...
When's the next conclave, Raza?
Yeah.
See, he's waiting till 2027. I don't know. I think that...
May I answer?
Yeah, please.
I would say after this conference, I think first coming together and having these exchanges and sharing each other's ideas, taking them home, thinking about them, and seeing what kind of networks we can build, what kind of collaborative opportunities we have. I think that is the way forward, because I really think the Global South needs to take pride in its identity. We have the majority of the world's population with us. We are rich civilizations. We have rich histories, languages, foods. So we need to bond over these, shared strengths that we have. And then, over time, I think we'll be able to build a world that we want to see for ourselves and for our children and, and the future. So in a way, it's like it ties in with Alex's vision. That
I also want to say we keep talking about Global South, but some people in the North are nice too. There's Sven. Say hi. Hi, Sven. So, it's not like we're not doing the whole North-South thing. We're not going to put you in the camps, okay, when we finally take over.
But I guess what I want to
So we will penalize you. Huh.
And Raza, maybe this is for you. Like, okay, so we've recorded all of these talks, right? They're going to be available. We've had 2 days together, which is hardly enough, but kind of amazing as well. But tangible, not just that we came together and we might forget or disperse, but we need to mobilize, right?
Yeah. I think on a personal level, you've met a lot of people, exchange numbers, get together. Look, you never know what might come out of it. So you stand at a crossroads. We don't know where those roads lead, but, we could take a few steps down them, see what happens.
And I also want to add something about an important detail that we forgot to mention. The escalator in the United Nations building in New York, that really started a revolution by refusing to carry President Trump.
There you go.
And maybe it could be an influence for us by saying, I prefer not to.
I like that. That was good. So I think one last question, or like, क्या करना है Raza? मुझे airport भी जाना है यार. Okay, we have to go to the airport. So last question. So anybody? No one?
I think it's over there.
No one? Okay, so there's okay, last 2 questions and that's it. Just keep them short if possible. Sorry guys. दे दो इन्हें mic यार. We're still on time, Mubashir. 6:15.
Yeah. My first question is for Ms. Aima. If we really think about that regional powers can eliminate or may bring some peace, then would you not think if every region has its own power, then there will be the confrontation between those regions as same as it was predicted by the clash of civilization, some sort of that situation. So I just want to understand that how will it be work if there will be no any body over them to look at. So as the global governance is failed till now is because we don't have any power over them to check all the confrontations between the global powers. So what this point you have?
So see, I am a strong believer in multilateralism, and I believe that dialogue, getting together, negotiation, conversation, these are all essential elements of making peace and keeping peace. Do we need power? Of course, we need rules. We need people who are able to enforce, states and governments who are able to enforce those rules. The objection over here is some countries create rules and then they enforce rules, but then they feel free to break those rules. That is the central tension in this existing system. So I would say if we are building new multilateral organizations or new forms of cooperation are emerging, I think it's wonderful. But what you essentially need is to ensure that sovereignty of other countries is not violated. Peaceful coexistence is promoted, and of course the values that you just touched upon. Universalism needs to be able to accommodate particularisms of different regions. So for example, Islamic concepts of justice, Confucian values, values or the cultural traditions from Latin American countries. So I'm just saying universalism is not westernization. Universalism is something far bigger, far more beautiful. So I don't know if I've answered that question, but
I think that's
yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's it.
No.
That's it?
Zara, there's one question over there.
Oh, there was
over there,
yeah,
over there.
okay. Oh, sorry, the gentleman in the blue. Well, I swear this is the last one. Okay. I've got your note.
Hello, my name is Kazim, and my question is, when we rethink global governance, is there an emerging definition of integrity, especially in the context of Pakistan?
Integrity?
Yeah.
No. There's your answer. I don't think that there's any consensus on any definitions anywhere, if I understood the question correctly.
Right.
Anyway, so I just, well, thank you all very, very much. Just give yourself a big hand. Don't bother with us. I know it's like late. Everybody's hungry.
Zara, I'm sorry to do this, but that gentleman over there has been raising his hand for a very long time. Sorry, just one last question.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, I didn't see.
Oh my God. Now what do we do? Okay,
Hello.
quickly.
Hello. If two global powers which are not accountable to the UN, like how you said, America would attack Hague if their politicians are, arrested. So in that case, what role would the UN play if two global powers like America and China are at war and both are not accountable to the UN?
I think the UN will like. But UN ki khair nahi yaar. Anyway. Yeah, okay, so, geez, fine. I swear, this is it. See, we're being more fair than the UNSC.
Interestingly, I have been ignored here.
You get the last word. You get the closing note, man. That's the best.
Okay. Coming to the topic, rethinking global governance. I think the topic should have been rethinking global control when it comes to United Nations. This is my comment. So it's all about control. It's all about power. We know that, and that fiasco is very much exposed. Secondly, coming to the governance, let's not talk about the wars. We have even a lot of discussion regarding that. Governance is a wide term, and it covers many areas and many aspects, including finances and resources of the regions. So my question is that when it comes to capitalism, the system that is holding all the systems together, you, the panel, the respected panel, as researchers, see the system of capitalism collapsing, and how soon is going to happen that? Number one question. Because rethinking means that there is a new system going to be emerged, or we are anticipating that. Second question is specifically to Alex. Alex, what I have extracted from your discussion is that you're not in favor of governments or the conventional system of the governments. So are you, or were you referring to the power finally going back to the community level? Is that what I have gained, or is there something else that you wanted to tell? So please clarify.
Sure.
And yes, let me, one last comment, that I'm just an ordinary human trying to comprehend the systems, the structures that are designed to make us live like this.
Yeah.
So I'm just navigating through that. There's no
We all are. Believe me. None of us know what we're saying.
And thank you so much.
Kaya, do you want to take the capitalism one?
Yeah, I think hopefully,
You're the Marxist,
hopefully soon,
Yeah.
with the revolution starting from the escalator, I think that will end in the destruction of capitalism. But I think it's just, I think a refusal of playing the game. I mean, if United Nations is not playing the game by the rules, then why should we? I mean, why should we enter the game at all? So we should be on the street level, on the collective level. And I think we should just be aware of our own power, yeah.
Fair enough. And Alex, the last question was for you.
Yeah, I think the question of how to think about, let's say, the state versus community, right? I think what I wanted to stress was that I don't find hope in the state, but I find so much hope in how I see communities mobilizing, neighbors helping each other. And we only have to look to a disaster to really see it. I think we have a tendency when there's a quote-unquote natural disaster, right? And often these are natural episodes, but which there are structural reasons why they affect certain people more than others. They hit marginalized communities more than others. But we see people coming together in those moments and helping each other. And the way that the world is structured right now, the powers that be tell us we have to be in charge. Because if we're not in charge, if we don't hold a baton and a gun, then all of you will eat each other. But the second we see the government disappear during a natural disaster, what we see is people helping each other. Always people self-organize, they find ways to protect each other, they find ways to help each other, they rescue each other, and no one's paying them, no one's telling them what to do, and the state isn't present. And for me, this is the clearest example of human nature. Capitalism tells us that human nature is to fight with each other, is to attack each other as much, to steal our resources. But it's actually the structure of capitalism that turns us against each other, that makes us think that we have to defeat each other. The only way to win is to kill each other. When humans are left to their own devices, they help each other, they protect each other. And I see it over and over again. They self-organize, they find ways to help the most vulnerable. And I think for me, this kind of behavior that we see around us and that we hope for in our relationships with people around us needs to be the model at whatever level we're looking, at the state, at the international level. But for me, it always comes back to the community. Because if there's injustice in our community and we're willing to tolerate it and accept it, then we're going to tolerate it and accept it at the international level. And so we have to stop it where we have power and action, because I can't take away the veto of anyone at the UN. I can't reform the UN, but I can change the world in which I live. I can change the relations that I have. And for me, that's where hope comes from. It's from being able to figure out how do you change and make the world better where you are.
I think that's the best closing note. I can't do better than that. So thank you all very much again. Thank you all for joining us here. And small request, we just have to pose for a photo on the stage. Oh, all the speakers. Okay, all the speakers have to pose for a photo. Sorry. Okay.